Greetings, folks. My name is Rod Machado, and I'd like to talk to you about the Pachyderm in the Parlor. I mean your cognitive skills between the ages of 40 to your late 60s, in other words, middle age, and how this affects you as a pilot. The fact is that our pilot population is aging, and most pilots want to know if they're still safe to fly when entering the fourth quarter of life. The good news is that we're aging much more gracefully nowadays. Let's not forget that the good Senator John Glenn rode the space shuttle into orbit at 77 years of age. Yes, it's true that the senator wanted to do a spacewalk, and NASA said no. I think they were worried that he might go outside and wander off. Keep in mind that this topic is valuable for all middle-aged pilots, as well as the flight instructors, young or older, that will be teaching them. So there's something here for everybody. So grab your walker, strap on that oxygen tank, and let's roll. Okay, let's Mosey. I think that's better. We'll begin with the bad news about aging. As you age, your physical reflexes slow down. Big surprise. No, it's unlikely that you'll ever get so slow that you could be run over by two guys pushing a car with a flat tire. So no worries there. Fortunately, you do not need the reflexes of a kung fu fighter to fly an airplane safely. In fact, one of the very important rules you learn about the physical act of flying an airplane is that slow is smooth and smooth is fast. You don't need to be fast to be a general aviation pilot, especially a safe one. If you can drive a car safely, then your physical reflexes are sufficient for learning how to fly an airplane. Let there be no doubt that we decline physically in other areas as we age. By our 70s and 80s, we might have lost as much as 20 to 30 degrees of peripheral vision, which means we often have to learn a different way to perceive when to flare an airplane. Well, we might also lose our color vision and near vision, and often we begin to see floaters, spots, and sprites in our visual field. And unless we exercise and maintain good posture, we might eventually look like we're a recent graduate of the Quasimodo Posture School. But you probably already knew this, right? Right. What concerns most folks, however, is their cognitive decline with age. Yes, we do experience cognitive decline with age, some people more than others. The problem is that we have very little data on how aging actually affects pilots. You see, most of the studies on aging over the past half century were conducted on folks in nursing homes. Now, isn't this kind of like reading the obituaries for health tips? Most folks in nursing homes have already experienced significant decline. However, there are a few recent studies on cognitive performance with age, and they're worth recognizing. For instance, Dr. Sheri Willis at Penn State University is involved with an ongoing aging study of over 6,000 people that began in 1956. And her research indicates that we experience cognitive decline in two areas, notably distraction and processing speed. However, her research also indicates that we experience a cognitive increase in four other areas: vocabulary, verbal memory, spatial orientation, and, most important, inductive reasoning. And that's our ability to generate and test new hypotheses. And this study found that we do better on cognitive tests up to age 65 than we did in our 20s. In short, we become better at problem solving in middle age. And that is extremely important, especially for a pilot. Another study on cognition was done by Dr. Paul Balties at the Max Planck Institute. And this is where they do some great thinking over there at the Max Planck Institute. And I guess now we know why we don't hear anything from the folks at the Minimum Planck Institute. You see, Dr. Baltes found that the quality we call wisdom is greatest when we reach 65 years of age. Dr. Baltes suggests that in middle age we experience small declines but experience huge gains in our ability to see connections. Then there's Pat Kramer at the University of Illinois, who studied the cognitive performance of air traffic controllers. Now, in the United States, air traffic controllers have a mandatory retirement age of 56, but not in Canada, where it's much older. So Dr. Kramer packed up his bags, went to Canada, and tested the cognitive abilities of young and older controllers. And he found that younger controllers did a better job at cognitive processing speed. Big surprise. However, older controllers did just as well as younger controllers in two important areas: visualizing in 3 dimensions and ambiguity, or coping with conflicting or insufficient information, the kind of information that essentially air traffic controllers deal with all the time. Unfortunately, it turns out that there are very few studies that specifically focused on general aviation pilots, but one such study was conducted by Dr. Joy Taylor at the Stanford Aging Center, and it involved 118 pilots using flight simulators. Now, these pilots were between 40 and 69 years of age, and the study ran over a 3-year period and tested a pilot's ability at communicating, traffic awareness, and situational awareness. Not surprisingly, Ms. Taylor found that older pilots did not do as well the first time they used the simulator. However, as the tests were repeated, the older pilots actually became better than the younger pilots at the essential skills that this study intended to measure, and those skills were avoiding traffic and situational awareness. Dr. Taylor's study revealed one essential idea that all pilots need to recognize, and that is, if we keep proficient and practice our skills, those skills will remain at a very high level well into middle age. So keep in mind that as we age, we're more likely to identify our declines, but not realize our gains. After all, these 4 studies indicate that wisdom peaks at 65. And even in middle age, we're able to maintain a high level of situational awareness, abstract thinking, inductive reasoning, and pattern recognition. And you should find a great deal of comfort in those results. But wait, you say, as an older person, I can't seem to remember anyone's name anymore, and I'm worried that I'm going senile. Well, I can assure you that not remembering names is not at all uncommon beyond the age of 35. And here's where it's important to know something about how your brain works. You see, Dr. Deborah Burke at Pomona College in California tells us that names go missing because of the way the brain organizes and stores its information. It turns out that the sound associated with a name, its phonology, and the physical person who owns that name, those two things are stored in different areas of the brain. And over time, with aging, that connection weakens, making it more difficult to remember that person's name. Then again, we don't have much trouble remembering someone's occupation because this information becomes associated and stored in similar locations along with the identity of the person in question. Additionally, as we age, we know so many more people to the extent that it becomes much more difficult to keep track of them all. Well, knowing how your brain works allows you to understand one of the pilot's biggest, and I say biggest, cognitive challenges that they experience during middle age. And I'm speaking of the ability to be easily distracted. According to researcher Dr. Cheryl Grady, a portion of our brain known as the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex is what allows us to maintain our concentration on any task. Now, the DPC is located about 2 inches behind the forehead, right about there. Now, don't poke it with your finger either. As we age, Dr. Grady discovered that we use less of the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex and instead go to a place that she calls the default area of the brain. And yes, you can poke that with your finger if it pleases you. The default area of our brain is the place we go to daydream. Well, isn't that just lovely? The last thing a pilot needs to do is start daydreaming during critical portions of flight while aloft. No wonder NASA was reluctant to let the good Senator Glenn go for a spacewalk. In middle age, we lose a little of our ability to switch off the default area and maintain our focus via the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex, unless, of course, we develop strategies to compensate for this. Fortunately, this is a relatively easy thing to do through something known as self-talk dialogues. Over the years, I've developed quite a few self-talk dialogues or strategies to keep students, especially older students, on task. For instance, during an instrument approach while approaching the final approach fix, the phrase, how low, how long, which way, helps a pilot maintain attention according to what's important at the time. Now, during an approach to any airport, a pilot might repeat, where am I going? How do I get there? And what do I do next? And hopefully they'll say this silently because it does make the passengers nervous when said out loud. And there are many self-taught dialogues and strategies that can help pilots focus on what's important at the time. And there's no reason that you shouldn't use them. I use them all the time. So there you have it. We do experience some cognitive decline as we age, but it turns out that we gain in other areas that are essential to safe flying. Of course, there may come a day when you have to make big changes, perhaps even giving up flying, like the day my grandfather started wearing a lanyard around his reading glasses to keep from losing them. That's right. He kept misplacing his glasses, slipping on pair after pair, not realizing that he was pushing each pair up over his hairline. We were all worried that one day he'd go outside in bright sunlight and start a fire on top his head. Well, if you'd like to learn more about aging and middle age, pick up a copy of this book by Barbara Strouch. It's an excellent primer on the subject. Folks, I've been Rod Machado, and may your air traffic controllers never speak at 60 with peak gusts to 90. Hello, folks. Rod Machado again. If you're interested in the ultimate Rusty Pilot Refresher course, and I do mean ultimate, then please take a look at my new 40-hour interactive e-learning private pilot ground school. Not only will you have lifetime access to all the essential private pilot material, you can also count on it being updated with every significant change made by the FAA. And if you're an IFR pilot and want to take your IFR knowledge game to the next level, then please consider owning my 8-hour Secrets of Instrument Approaches and Departures e-learning course.